long apprenticeship in which to come to terms with the bleak hardship of each Pennine winter and the constant struggle to earn a reasonable living from some of the most difficult farming terrain in England. Place names each tell their own story, linking the maps of the present to people and events of the past. The first communities in the area were those of the Celts, for it was they who carved their areas of Eden out of the primal forest. Little remains of their burial sites like Cacarrium, or their homes in places like Stonegarth in Teesdale. I'm sitting beside what was a fireplace in a hut, and there's another hut there, another one there, all surrounded by what was a gigantic stockade. And we know it was built around 3,000 years ago by Iron Age people. And what a smashing place for a house. Super view down the valley and the Tees, not very far away. They were just one phase of immigrants who saw the great Tees waterfall of high force as they put their own skills and fortunes to the High Pennine test. Few stayed, some moved on, and some, keeping faith with the wheel of time, returned to spice the seasons with their own endeavours. None are more famous than the Gypsies, whose roots are still firm in the Celtic tradition of horses and song. They fill the town of Appleby with the clatter of wagons and traps and the beating of hooves which signal the annual horse fair in this their Eden Valley. Each year they return to this virginal spot, bequeathed to them for all time by royal charter of James II in 1685. They bring their families, trade their horses and solicit a fortune or two. Appleby Fair, though a high spot, is but a punctuation in a circle of travelling which orders their life throughout each year. They call it doing the round.
We stay at one place and never go down to Appleby. We go to Benton, see all over the place, don't we? All circle all the way around.
It just circles around different fairs. It doesn't. It's not a Pacific time. It just happens. You come up here and you shake the hand, and that's what it's all about. Yeah, yeah. Everything boils down to the shake of a hand. It's a bit of fun. You know, you might walk away 3 days later and think to yourself, "What the hell have I bought?" Like, but it's all the shake of a hand, isn't it?
I'm a romantic ride. I'm a real custy guy, and I wonder and travel beneath the blue sky, 'cause the wheels are my own. The road I like to roll, it's romance alone in the wagon of gold. I was born on the wheel of a wagon, keep rolling, a wagon all lined out in gold. I was born on the wheel of a wagon, and that's why they call me the romantic ride.
Today, others do the round to a very different beat. New age travellers who take the high road in search of solace, ancient dignity and meaning. This hippie convoy has found its makeshift Avalon in a complex of abandoned heavy metal workings which scar the head of the West Allen Valley. But flower power didn't start in 1967. It's been there, an immeasurable force for peace, binding and ordering the lives of people across the ages. Every year it comes to Warcup with a prayer and a posy. Here the Pennine people still celebrate the flower of youth and the first flush of summer, as their ancestors did before. It's called the Warcup Rush Bearing, for the crosses carried by the boys are made of the green stems of Juncus effusus, the common rush, which has over eons of mismanagement invaded the otherwise lush upland pastures. The whole is consummated with song in Warcup's 12th century church. Idyllic it may be, but the rush-strewn fells which cradle such angelic scenes are in actual fact a battlefield. Warcup Fell lives up to its name, for it's part of nearly 17,000 acres of the North Pennines, over which army manoeuvres keep the red flag flying. All vital to the defence of the realm, and not a bad thing for local jobs or for nature conservation either. The local fauna, and especially the flora, including mountain pansies and orchids, each year pass their survival course with flying colours. Another survivor, well dug into the high fells, is Talpa europea, the once common mole. His is a year-long battle to find food from these skeletal soils, and to avoid the attention of people like Peter Rutherford, son of Walter, a mole catcher before him in Allendale.
My dad showed us how to go on when I was about 7, 8 years old, and he was on a mole clearing society, and it finished, but there's odd farmers still like to have them cleared, so my dad's getting on in a bit now, so I kind of followed on from him. There's a gully here, and there's a mole obviously decided it's nice and wet. There's plenty of worms here, so you follow the gully all the way up until he finds the worms, gets himself fed. I think if I put a trap in here, he'll come back tomorrow. There should be a mole in by tomorrow. It's a losing battle actually, around here anyway, because the whole place is invaded with them. One farm will catch them and the other one won't, you know, some can't be bothered with them. Some think they do good. I think they're a lovely animal. I do, honest. They're far nicer than rats or anything like that, but it's just the damage they do, you know, they've got to be sorted out. They love to go down the foundations of the walls and tip the walls over. That's one of their favourite haunts, that. Anywhere where there's moisture, that's where you'll find the moles. They're territorial animals, so when you trap them, the moles on, say on this farm here, all the other farms around about, if nobody traps them on there, they just invade. They just move straight away because they put what you call a scent gland out, and this is right around their boundaries, around the borders. They all have their own little patch, and as soon as you trap one, obviously the scent gland goes away. So another one thinks, oh, here's some nice witch picking, I'll move into there and we'll have a nice time in here. And that's exactly what happens. When I've gathered them all out the mole traps, I usually go and hang them on a fence so the farmer can see that I've caught his moles, and he can't come back to you afterwards and say, well, you haven't done the job properly, or there's still any amount about. If they're hung on the fence, they can't be putting heaps up.
So the mole catcher still barbs his gruesome trademark on the wire, signalling to another survivor that he has earned his pay. It is the tenant farmers who are the real guardians of the Pennine Fells. For them, life is a year-round struggle with the elements, ecology and economy.
we lamb an awful lot of these swale ewes that we never see them lamb, and they're no bother at all. But this one's happened to have a leg in the wrong position. The lamb's been ready to be born and started to move with the leg folded back, and it never would have, the ewe would never have had it on its own without assistance.
A new member of the local community fills its lungs with cold, clean air. Poor old Mum, wearied by a difficult delivery, is touch and go whether she'll take on her new responsibilities. But with a little help, all is well, and another lamb makes its debut into the economy of this fold in the fells. Sheep farmers like Alan and Doreen Scott in Upper Teesdale are born and brought up to the rigours of hill farming. They know of a recession which comes every year without fail, along with the first frosts and snows of winter, and they, like their sheep, are hardened to it. The economic cycle of birth, growth, maturity, death and decay has for generations kept these hills and valleys in good heart, overflowing with crops of great beauty, diversity and interest. Pignut, wood cranesbill. Now at a rough count that makes about 34 different sorts of wild grasses and flowers in this one meadow, and thank goodness flower-filled meadows like this are still a common feature across large parts of the northern Pennines, and they've served the local farmers well for well over 1,000 years. You see, the animals will be grazing up on the highland throughout the summer, and then they're brought down here and foddered in the fields, and by tradition you see a hay crop's cut and then the animals are fed here, so all that nutrient is returned directly into the soil and there's no need to add anything. And research is showing that the cows and the other animals do graze more contentedly on such a diversity of plant material. And it must taste much, much better than nitrogen-soaked perennial ryegrass for breakfast, dinner, tea, supper, day after day. And of course the magic of the whole thing to me, a botanist, is that the hay crop won't be taken until after all the grasses and flowers have set seed, and as the farmer turns the hay to dry, all those seeds are broadcast, and so we've had a continuity of diverse beauty across the centuries. But this cycle of sustainable management has been broken right across the Pennines. The flower-rich acres have been replaced by hectares of perennial rye, which must be soaked with nitrogen to keep it green and growing. Fertiliser costs money, and so does the equipment which deals with the lush green harvest, which will be left out in the sun in bags to mature like a good wine. Perhaps this helps put back some of the taste of those vintage meadow years, when the rich bouquet garni of flowers and herbs kept the animals well content. Be it the old way or the new, for the Good Shepherd there are rewards, like the annual show here at Tan Hill, highest pub in England set twixt the North Pennines and the Yorkshire Dales.
13 second, 49 third.
But it's not all accolades and rosettes. It's a time to get together and to talk to friends. Talk about fortunes on the wax or on the wane.
38, up 38, and you on the side, gentlemen. At 38, big forward, 38, and 38, big forward, 38, I'll take 9 if it'll help. At 38, big forward, 38, big forward, 38, I'll take 9 more. At 39, and 39, big forward, 39, and 40 bed, and 44, big forward, 40 bed. Can we sell them, Mr. Allinson? 41, 41, 41, 42, 42, bid forward, 42. At 42, bid forward, 42, I'll take 3. At 42, can we sell them, Mr. Allinson? 43, 43, 43, take 4, sir. At 43, at 44, 44, bid 4. 45, take another, Mr. At 45, at 45, at 46, men I'll sell them this time, Mr. Allinson. At 46, we're going on. He's very disappointed, but on the market, is that right? At 46 pounds. Have a good customer in. At 46, John Yeats, 46.
These last 2 years have been a drastic reduction in value. There's really too many sheep around, so we're finding that we're having to take a lot less money for these sheep. A few years ago these ewes were £1,800 each, which should be the proper value, and today you hear they're falling from 50 to 20, the same ewes. Particularly farmers that are relying totally on sheep, it's a disaster. They've worked a year for nothing.
Disaster it may be for some, but the cycle of time once more demands that thanks must be given to the powers above. Worth it or not, all has been safely gathered in, and the people of Ninebanks are raising their harvest home ere the storms of winter come. But these days there are other, more ominous clouds on the broad horizons of the Pennines, and the harvest place is not so golden. The sheep still do have their winter woolies shorn, and the wool is packed up for the wool marketing board. But the honest truth is, it's worthless, and one can only wonder who is being fleeced.
Before the machine, every farmer supplied a man or two, and they went to help everybody else, and they moved around the dale. And it was a big social occasion. I remember when some of the older chaps used to come, and they used to take about 10 minutes to shear a sheep, and then they used to sit 20 minutes and have a beer and have a chat and smoke the pipe, and then they would set away again and flip another one. There isn't time for that these days. Today there's only the two of us who are I've seen about 25 to 30 people here. It's another old tradition that's gone by the board. Unfortunately, but there it is. It's I suppose it's progress. And then we're up against it. The wool isn't worth, in proportion, it isn't worth anything like it used to be. As I say, it's just a tidying up exercise. We need to shear the sheep for the sheep's benefit, but really the cost of shearing and the cost of the other jobs you do set against the price of wool, it's we're out of pocket.
It may not have been a good year on the farm, but the seasons march on. Nature, even in her dying stage, remains beautiful in decay. Wild fungi and the autumn leaves in my North Pennine home, and there's a bit of clearing up to be done. The cycle of nature is almost complete. It's back to autumn and that same old job of sweeping up the leaves again. But of course the trees have already done their job, and they've stored away enough energy, enough food for the long winter ahead. And then down come the leaves, putting some nutrients back into the natural cycle of things. Now mine are going off into the slow fire of the compost heap, and then some will be returned round the base of this tree so that it gives us a good crop of cherries next year. You see, we're all part of that same natural cycle of things. Autumn comes and goes and turns to winter. There's ice, not snow, but it's only a matter of time and the sheep still have to be looked after. These days, Doreen Scott has a machine to give a helping hand.
Well, it's very bleak, but, you know, we've all been born and bred to it, and it's a struggle at times, but we always manage through. The sheep are all brought down from the fell, so they're all to feed and see to. And that's all to do first before any housework or anything like that. So we give a hand outside first before we come inside. If it's a bad snowstorm, you can get quite a lot buried and it can be quite a disaster. We go with the snow machines and the dogs, and they can sniff them out and then we dig them out. And sometimes if they've been in for a while, they don't always survive, they still go down once you've got them out. Prices have been bad, both lamb and wool. The wool, we only get so much payment one year and then we get the rest the following year, so that isn't very good at all. It's really not worth clipping off at times. And the sheep have been very bad this year, yes. A few people up this way, well, they have other ways and means of getting a living, but anybody that's, you know, just on a small farm will have a hard job to carry on. We rely on subsidies. There's a great deal comes through the letterbox, and if it wasn't for the subsidies, it would be a poor do for the farmers on the hills.
Husband Alan has the final say on making a living amongst the seasons in this, England's last wilderness.
My idea is, so long as we can make a living, a reasonable living, we'll stay there and we'll do whatever we're asked to do. We'll produce sheep, we'll produce cattle, we'll produce conservation habitat, we'll produce the beautiful scenery that we've been producing for generations. But we cannot live on scenery and fresh air. We must have some sort of help from government to do that.
These days, many people regard landscapes as amongst the nation's most valuable assets. Green treasure, inherited from our ancestors to have and to hold in safety and to hand on to our children. But over the ages, landscapes like this have been valued in many different ways, not as objects of beauty to be conserved, but as mere resources to be exploited in the quickest way possible for other treasures held in their depths. Mineral wealth. Just look at it. Not gold, but lead and silver. Loads and loads of it. And not just in this little stream, but all over these hills. It's Klondike time, have it? Small quantities of silver and lead had been flashed from these hills since the Romans came this way. But Klondike time did come to these parts in the 1800s. Mine owners grew rich and silver and lead gave a livelihood to thousands of people along the banks of the silver rivers. But for the miners, that was not enough. Wages from the mine had to be supplemented by hard work in the fields. Killop in Weardale, with its enormous wheel, lay at the heart of this dual economy. Derelict for years, it's now been restored as an open-air museum, a fitting tribute to those leaden years. The man responsible for much of the effort is now its caretaker and curator, Ian Forbes. Well, nice glow of the warm fire, but it's a pretty depressing place, a mine shop. What exactly was its function?